everyone, and welcome to our lecture for chapters 11 through 13 of our CIS 2131 class, Python programming. For this week, we've got 3 chapters we're going through, right? Chapter 11 is kind of the main one. It covers regular expressions, and that's something that we will probably use a little bit more often than the topics covered in 12 and 13, but it is good to know about them and to understand them. So a lot of this lecture is kind of giving a brief overview of some of these things, but we will talk briefly about regular expressions here at the beginning here, and you'll probably end up using regular expressions a little bit. If you haven't already used them in the previous project, then you may be using them in the upcoming projects. And regular expressions, actually, if you didn't use them for our project where we were validating a user's email, regular expressions actually make that a lot easier. So we'll learn about them today, and we'll also cover a couple other things from the other chapters as well. So by the end of this lecture, you'll be able to use regular expressions to search and extract text patterns. You'll be able to retrieve data from the internet using Python. You'll understand how web pages and APIs send data, and you'll be able to parse HTML and JSON data from web services, right? And at the very minimum, you'll understand some of these concepts here a little bit better, which is mostly the goal of this lecture and the chapters for this week. So why do these topics matter? Well, Python is often used for data extraction, web scraping, automation, and working with APIs. So these chapters are going to introduce the tools needed to interact with data on the internet, okay? And regular expressions are actually used to interact with data on the internet. So let's start by taking a look at regular expressions, right? So regular expressions, or regex, allow you to search for patterns in text, extract specific information, and replace text automatically. They're a lot more powerful than simple string searching, right? And we've just recently gone over strings and working with strings. They're definitely more powerful than just the regular string searching. And an example problem could be finding email addresses in a large document. An example problem that regular expressions could solve, that is. So how do we use regular expressions? So we need to import the regex module, right? And Python uses the RE module for regular expression module for regular expressions. So you just type import RE at the top. And some common functions that you can use are search, which finds the first match, find all, which returns all matches, split, which splits the text, and replace text, which, and sub, which replaces the text. I got ahead of myself for a second. So these are some pretty common functions that you can use from the regular expression module. So when you're working with regular expressions, you'll probably be using a few of these functions. So I would familiarize yourself with some of the more common functions that are available. So as a simple example here, right, we're importing RE at the top, right? And we have a variable named text here that is holding the string literal, my number is 5551234. And then all we're doing is we're using re.search, and we are searching our text variable for 555. And then we're storing that in match. And so if we have a match, right, it'll print match found. So this is just a very basic regex example, just to give you an example and to sort of familiarize yourself with how you would use regular expressions. Regular expressions, there's also pattern symbols, right? So here are some common regex symbols. Period is any character, star is 0 or more, plus is 1 or more. The square brackets are a character set. The caret symbol, or the symbol on the 6 key on the keyboard, right? That's the start of line, and the $sign is end of line. So an example of using these symbols could look something like this. We may use caret symbol from, and what this does is it looks for any line starting with the word from. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So if you wanted to look for any line ending in the word from, you would use a $sign and then type from, right? So that's how we can use some of these pattern symbols for regular expressions. And again, it's important to note that regular expressions, they search for patterns in text, okay? And that's why these symbols are so important. Next, we can move on, right, to network programming. So Python can communicate with servers using network protocols. And some of you may have learned about some of this stuff that we're about to talk about already. So if you have, consider this a refresher. And if you haven't, then this is kind of a bare bones surface level, sort of how the web works type of dealio. So, don't worry about it too much. We're just trying to get a brief overview here. So examples of protocols, right? We have HTTP. This is for web pages. We also have FTP, which is for file transfer, and SMTP, which is for email. And Python can request data from servers using URL requests, okay? So how do we open a URL in Python? Well, Python uses the URL lib for web requests, right? So we import here, we're importing URL lib.request, and then we're setting our URL equal to our request, and we're opening this URL right here. And then for each line in the URL, we will print it, right? So what this program does, it connects to a web server, it downloads the data, and then it prints the contents, okay? And just to quickly touch on how the web works, right? The basic web request process is that the client sends a request, the server processes the request, and then the server returns the data, okay? So an example request would be get, and then here we have a URL that we want the server to get for us. And then what the server does is it processes our request and it returns the HTML data, okay? So this is just a very basic bare bones look at how the web works, because it's important if you're going to work with it in Python, you need to understand how it works to some degree, right? We also have web services. So web services allow programs to communicate with each other. So instead of returning a web page, servers return structured data, right? So normally the server would return HTML data, which is a web page. In this case, servers return structured data in common formats such as JSON and XML. And most modern APIs are going to be using JSON. So what is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it basically represents structured data, okay? And Python can easily convert JSON into dictionaries. So to work with JSON in Python, you just import the JSON module, okay? And that's how we're able to work with JSON in Python. And then we can also access web APIs, right? APIs allow programs to retrieve data from services. So for example, we could retrieve weather data, maps, social media, financial data, and Python downloads the JSON data and processes it. Okay. So some key takeaways about each of these concepts, right? Regular expressions, they're a powerful pattern matching tool, and they're used for extracting text data. Network programming, Python can retrieve data from web services, and it uses HTTP requests. And web services, APIs return structured data, and JSON is the most common format for this. And I do have some real world applications in here. Again, these chapters are mostly to just give you an overview, and also that's kind of the goal of this short lecture video here, is to just give you an overview into each of these concepts. They aren't really concepts that we'll be using heavily in the course, excuse me. But they are important and they are useful when working with Python. And depending on the career choice that some of you are going into, it may be important to learn more about it in the future and to be aware of it. Okay. So these techniques are used in web scraping, data science, automation scripts, cybersecurity tools, and API integrations. So again, Python is widely used for internet data processing. So if you're going into a field that requires internet data processing, just remember that Python is used heavily for it, and it has some really good options for working with just the internet in general, right? So, end of lecture here. I know it's a shorter one, but again, most of this week's reading and lecture is just trying to get a brief overview. We're not trying to go super in depth this week on these topics, just because we won't be focusing heavily on them in the course. So, you should now have an understanding of regular expressions, how Python retrieves web data, and JSON and APIs and how to process it. Okay? So that is really all for this lecture. I know it's a shorter one, so sorry about that. But again, just make sure you have kind of a basic understanding about some of these concepts, and use this time during this week where we don't have like a longer lecture or a lot of assignments. Use this time to work on the project that will be due soon. So that is all for this lecture, and I will see you guys in the next video.